Thanks, Jeff. Those were very appropriate words of our time. Now we are going to have Jay Johnson give an introduction to our speaker, Joel Skousen.
All right, well, glad everybody can be here tonight. And who's all from Weber County? Just raise your hand. Okay. Outside Weber County? All right. Welcome to Weber County. Well, just everybody already knows Joel. I'll read a little bit of his bio, and then turn time over to him. Joel Skousen is a political scientist by training, specializing in philosophy of law and constitutional theory. He is also a designer of high-security residences and retreats, has designed self-sufficient, high-security homes throughout North America, and has consulted in South America as well. His latest book in this field is Strategic Relocation, American Guide to Safe Places. I've seen a few people with it. Anybody got one they can hold up in the air, show everybody? All right, there you go. Be sure, if you didn't get a sign by Joel. It's not every day we get a presidential candidate here in the house. All right, and is active in consulting with persons who need to relocate for security and increase self-sufficiency. He also assists people who need to live near large cities, develop contingency retreat plans involving rural and recreational property. Joel was raised in Oregon and later served as a fighter pilot in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam era prior to beginning his design firm specializing in high security residences and retreats. During the 80s, he took leave of absence to serve as the chairman of the Conservative National Committee in Washington, D.C. and concurrently served as the executive editor of the Conservative Digest for 2 years. For 2 years, he published a newsletter entitled The World Affairs Brief and served as the senior editor of Cogitations. I'm wearing my Santa Claus glasses, my other side of Santa Claus glasses tonight. And the quarterly journal on law and government. The World Affairs Brief is now back in publication. It's available as a weekly email newsletter. And I highly recommend it. I've been a subscriber for years, and it's a plethora of great information. How many World Affairs Brief subscribers are there out there? All right. His main idea of focus in the weekly brief is the hidden globalist agenda behind the U.S. foreign domestic policy. He has developed a working theory to explain the West's conflicting policies, both supporting and attacking at different times, places, seemingly contradictory positions on terrorism. Communist-backed revolutions, drugs, money laundering, and organized crime. His unique point of view is widely appreciated in conservative circles. He's author of numerous books, and enough of me, and let's turn it over to Joel. All right.
Well, it's good to be with you. Can you hear me all?
Oh, yeah.
Joe, what'd you say? He says, I can talk to you as long as you stay awake. I've never had anyone fall asleep on me yet. But I won't keep you all night. It was so good to start out with the wonderful song, America the Beautiful. I've always thought that ought to be a national anthem. It just draws your heartstrings about America. And it's too bad that we're losing that country. You know, I'm a member of the Constitution Party and running for president under that banner. My uncle was the great W. Cleveland Skousen, greatest champion of the Constitution ever. He ran the National Center for Constitutional Studies. He spoke to millions of people in America. And then it all died at once when Ronald Reagan got elected. His funding dried up. He had 6 national constitutional centers spread around the United States. He had to let everybody go because conservatives thought we won. So we don't have to fund the Constitution. And that happens when Donald Trump got elected too. Funding for conservative organizations dried up as well. But we didn't win. Donald Trump didn't know how to drain the swamp. He had never been a conservative before. In fact, he was a Democrat. He was best friends with Hillary and Bill Clinton. But he had good populist feelings inside. He had these gut feelings about how to make America great, and it resonated with people. But the trouble is, when you have good gut feelings, but you don't have the arguments to back it up, and you get surrounded by deep state advisors, and why? Because, you know, there were over 400 available places of employment in the West Wing of the White House. He didn't know any conservatives, so he turned to Reince Priebus, the head of the Republican National Committee, and said, well, tell me who to fill the slots. And that's why you have so many deep state people in the White House always betraying Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, to his credit, could tell when he'd been betrayed by FBI Director Comey. But he didn't know who to replace him with, so he goes to his advisors, they tell me who to replace him with. And they say, how about Christopher Wray? Well, Christopher Wray was deep state. How do I know that? Because he was part of the 9/11 cover-up. 9/11 was a deep state operation from the higher end of the terrorists to loaded the buildings with explosives. It wasn't the airplanes that brought those down. And those hijackers didn't hijack the airplane. They couldn't even fly Cessna airplanes. And I'll tell you, as a military pilot, you wouldn't be able to turn off the autopilot in an airliner or find the switch if you've never flown in those before, let alone reprogram the navigation computer to get back halfway across the country to New York and do a precision strike on the towers. I'm part of Pilots for 9/11 Truth, and one of our pilots found out that those planes, because of the anti-terrorism laws, had been equipped with what they called uninterruptible autopilots, meaning there were two sets of autopilots in those airliners, at least two of them anyway. And they simply will take control away from the pilot. Now you can do this because when you move the stick in an airliner, you're not moving any cables or controls, you're moving a computer. If you take the stick away from the computer and put it on the autopilot, there's nothing the pilot can do. You move the stick, you can press buttons, nothing changes. That airplane is going for a ride. And they did that so that they can take it away from the hijacker and land it against his will. But they had uninterruptible autopilots on at least two of those airplanes, that one of them which hit the tower. Now there were two other airplanes that we have the radar tapes in our possession. And they took off, one from Boston Logan and one from Dulles, and they rendezvoused over the middle of the United States, and they switched places with two aircraft from the West Coast, both 757s. And one of those aircraft they switched places with ran into, it was the second plane to hit the World Trade Center. And if you remember the video, remember that airplane banks its wings really sharply in order to hit the South Tower? And you see that big bulge on the bottom of the fuselage? That wasn't a normal 757. That wasn't the one that took off from Boston Logan. Every co-pilot is required to walk around that airplane and check every inch of it to accept it before they take off. You think he would have accepted that airplane if he saw that great huge bulge on the bottom of the fuselage? Well, I called Boeing after I saw that film and I said, I noticed there was that big bulge on that fuselage of the 757 that hit the South Tower. I'm a military pilot, flew F-4s, flying McDonnell Douglas, now owned by Boeing. And I can tell you that nothing we get on those airplanes, no changes could be made unless it was signed up by Boeing. Did you modify or sign off on that modification? And you know what she told me? We didn't do it. She didn't say it doesn't exist. She didn't say there's no modification. They knew, but they said we didn't do it. That's right, the deep state did it. Do you think terrorists from Saudi Arabia could have modified a Boeing aircraft like that? You see, this was a setup. This was a complete deep state operation from beginning to end. The next plane that rendezvoused from a drone aircraft was a 757, specially modified to do a 5G turn to hit the Pentagon at 550 miles an hour, which exceeds the maximum possible speed of 757 aircraft. And it had a missile under the wing. Now, I've shot missiles. I know what a missile looks like when it comes off the rails. And when you see the Pentagon video, you see that airplane come right close to the ground, and you see this big plume of smoke, and then boom, you see this big white explosion above the Pentagon. I don't know how many of you remember that video. But do you know that when an aircraft hits a building, it only makes red and black colors, red fire and black smoke. White explosive color is only from high explosives. Now why do I know that there was a missile on that wing? Because remember, there are 3 holes in the penetrone. Remember those big 12-foot circular holes going through all 3 wings of the penetrone? Well, I'll tell you, if an aluminum aircraft hit the front wall, which was newly designed, rebuilt, reinforced concrete, it would have smashed up and never penetrated anything, let alone make 2 identical 12-foot holes in rings B and C. That was made by a missile. And part of the proof of that is part of the list of debris inside the World Trade Center was half of a radome. Now what's a radome? It's the fiberglass nose of an aircraft that conceals the radar that goes back and forth. If you hit a wall with a fiberglass radome at 500 miles an hour, it would be confetti. Half of the radome was inside the building. What does that mean? There was a hole in that wall when it hit. There's no other physical explanation of how half of a radome gets through a reinforced concrete wall intact. Now these are not conspiracy theories, ladies and gentlemen. These are facts. And I can prove them. That's why nobody debates me on 9/11. Now, there was one witness that saw what happened and gave a very accurate description when he saw this 757. And it wasn't 757. It wasn't no plane hit the Pentagon just because there were confetti-sized pieces all over the place. The plane did hit the Pentagon, but he said, very accurately, he said, I saw the plane smash into the wall, and the wall held up like a champ, he said. The airplane coupled up against it, and then it exploded and disappeared. Now, if there was a bomb in the fuselage, like a suitcase bomb, in the baggage compartment, and it blew up, how many pieces of airplane would there be? Would it destroy the wings? No, it wouldn't touch the wings. It would blow the tail off, and it would blow big chunks of the fuselage, and there would be seats around it. So that's what happens when a luggage bomb goes off in an aircraft. But there weren't any bigger pieces than 2 feet long of that fuselage, and most of it was confetti spread all over the lawn in the parking lot. And that's what led that French analyst to say, where's the airplane? It never happened. Well, it did happen. But you see, you can't explode an airplane like that unless it was loaded plane to tail, including the wings, with explosives. And that's why the military people that came out of the Pentagon said, we smell cordite. Well, cordite's the composition of plastic explosives. You don't get that in a crash of an airplane unless it's loaded with explosives. Now, could the terrorists that loaded that airplane tail to wings with explosives that made it disappear like that? No way. And that's why there were only a few major pieces inside the Pentagon. But my purpose is not to go through the 9/11 conspiracy with you tonight, but just let you know that the government is a professional at lying to you about things. And they did about 9/11. And they did about many other things. And I'm probably the nation's top expert in conspiracy. And that's what you've got to know in order to drain the swamp. That's what you've got to know to expose the deep state. And Donald Trump doesn't have it. Robert F. Kennedy doesn't have it, even though he knows about the conspiracy. He's correct. They killed his uncle JFK and his father RFK. He knows precisely how they killed his father. He had 2 .38 bullets in his back, according to the autopsy. Sirhan in front of him with a 6-shot, 22 caliber revolver didn't hit him at all. And there were 9 bullets in the cabinetry in that hotel that they were walking through. But 2 bullets in his back would kill him, said the autopsy, from his bodyguard standing right behind him. Now that's an example, as in the JFK assassination, where the Secret Service or bodyguards, etc., can be brought into the deep state for whatever reason. They can become part of the conspiracy. In the JFK assassination, there were 2 of the Secret Service step off the car so that they didn't get hit. They knew that the strike on the president was coming. Well, there's lots of conspiratorial knowledge that I can give you, but I want to talk about one that's very relevant to you today in this world affairs briefing. Oh, a little bit closer, okay. Let's talk about the assassination attempt on President Trump. Now, how many of you have read lots of suspicious and conspiratorial material in the alternative media. You all know now that the Secret Service and the police forces that were there knew at least 45 to 50 minutes before he was shot at that the shooter was on the grounds. He went through the metal detector to the venue, and they caught him with a handheld rangefinder. Now, it's not a rangefinder scope like you put on a rifle, or they would have been very simple. This was a handheld rangefinder. A little odd, but not enough to arrest the person. He went inside the venue, and then he left again. And he went out to his van and got a backpack, and he started scoping out the area, looking for a place, I guess, to mount the roof and watch where he could get away with a shot at the president without the snipers on the roof seeing him. Well, he finally, then after about 50 minutes, going back and forth, by the way, the police forces of Butler County, who had four snipers there because the Secret Service was cut down to 2 snipers and about 6 bodyguards, including 3 women, because the new head of the Secret Service, Miss Chima, is a woke woman who is determined to put as many women on the Secret Service as men. And they didn't do a very good job of protecting the president. But the point is, he had been shortchanged because Jill Biden had an event in Pittsburgh, and it took about half of Trump's Secret Service people to protect Jill Biden. Well, so the Butler County Police Forces and Sheriff's Department was doing a good job at all of the outside the venue. They were in charge of the outside, including protecting the building, which was the AGR International building, which the shooting took place. In fact, it was their headquarters. They were inside, most of the police and snipers, watching from the inside. A lot of good that does. But there were policemen from Butler County that were roaming around the outside, and they saw this person. And then you've probably seen the interview with the red-headed guy with the magnet cap talking to the BBC reporter. And he said, there he is up there on the roof. He's crawling up on the roof, bear crawling with a rifle. And he's alerting the police and waving his arms. He doesn't tell the BBC reporter how the police reacted, but they did react. They didn't just sit there. And in fact, the manager of Butler County, who was in charge of all these forces, gave an interview afterwards, and he told exactly what the police did. They went and began to walk around the building looking for this guy, didn't see him, and so one of the hefty officers boosted the other one up 10 feet high so that he could grab onto the edge of the roof, pulled himself up like this, and saw the shooter. The shooter immediately turns around and aims his rifle at him, and what's he going to do? He can't draw his gun. He's got both hands pulling himself up. Just his head is above there, and he drops down and hurts himself. And then both of them get on the radio for the common tactical frequency of which the Secret Service is on, and broadcast, shooter on the roof, shooter on the roof. And then the interviewer asked the manager of Butler City, how much time elapsed between that radio call and the firing of Donald Trump? And he said, I don't know. I wasn't there. They didn't tell me that. So he had no idea. Now that's a crucial question. Now I don't suspect it was much time at all. Because if you were the shooter on the roof and you saw a policeman pop his head up and drop down, you knew they were going to get after you very soon. So I think that's why he made his move and shot very quickly, and probably why he was not as accurate as he could have been. Although he was known as being rejected from the high school rifle club because he wasn't a good enough shot. In any case, going back to the venue now, you have on 2 roofs on the back of Donald Trump, one on the left and one on the right, 2 sniper teams. And you have the Secret Service sniper team visible from the view from Trump sitting in a podium, and there on top of the next roof is the sniper team. And the video shows them right before the 3 shots ring out that kill one person, nip Donald Trump's ear, and wound another person. 3 shots. They're aiming their rifles over in the direction of where this guy is waving his arm and pointing to the guy on the roof. And so the big question among everybody's mind, and they wrongly assume, they say, the snipers are watching this guy and they don't fire. There must have been a stand-down order. How many of you heard that? Must have been a stand-down order, right? Because they didn't fire. I mean, look, they've got the rifles trained right on him. Why didn't they fire? In fact, when you look at the video, and I've got in tomorrow's World Affairs brief. If you're not a subscriber, you can get a free sample copy. By going of this brief tomorrow, by going to worldaffairsbrief.com, on the left-hand side, click on Request a Sample. If you do tomorrow's brief, if you do it in the afternoon tomorrow, it takes me about till 10 or 11 o'clock to get it out. But I've got links to all the videos and the pictures so that you can see this. It's fascinating stuff. I've seen the video of these snipers. They're looking through their scope, and all of a sudden the 3 shots ring out and they duck. Now, what does that tell you? Any snipers in here? Any former military sharpshooters? If you're part of a conspiracy that you know that you're going to let this are you going to duck? No, you're expecting the shots to come. You're going to let it happen, right? They duck. They're surprised. That's the first indication that they're not part of the conspiracy to let it go. Number 2, he raises his head up then again above the scope. Because you see, if you look through a rifle scope, depending on the magnification and the distance, you can see maybe about 10 feet around the scope. 20 feet at the most if it's a long distance away. You can't see what's going on in the roof there. You can see. So we don't know what he was looking at. Were the snipers looking at the shooter or were they not? That's crucial information to know if it's an insider job or not, right? Well, you know, there was an anonymous post posted by Hal Turner. I don't know if you know who Hal Turner is, but he's a convicted FBI informant who was hired by the FBI to infiltrate the conservative movement. Now he's back out of prison. And he's still posting to the conservative movement with a lot of bogus and fucking insider information. That's Hal Turner for you. And a lot of people in Utah post Hal Turner because it's sensational. But I don't trust anything that he posts. Well, he posted a post by Anonymous that said, "My name is Jonathan Willis, and I'm the top Secret Service sniper at the Trump Avenue. And I had the shooter in my sights for 3 solid minutes, and the Secret Service never gave me permission to fire." Well, that's real smoking gun evidence of a conspiracy, isn't it? Well, I found out yesterday that that's bogus, because I found out proof that the snipers couldn't see the shooter. A European history professor who's now a U.S. citizen teaches in the U.S. named Arne Grimler. He's a historian, a specialist in maps. And he created a map of the vertical overhead view of the building where the sniper, or where the shooter was, where the snipers were, where Donald Trump was, and drew lines. And what nobody realized is that there's a big bushy tree between the snipers, and it's planted right in front of this building where the shooter was. Big bushy tree. It's huge. He draws lines from the snipers to the edge of the tree, and where's the shooter? Behind that tree. They couldn't see him. Neither one. Now, there were 2 sniper teams. One sniper. Lots of things people want me to talk about. But anyway, let me see if I can draw a picture for you in the air. So here's sniper team number 1. You draw a V-shaped line to the tree like this. Snipers are behind it on the roof. They can't see it. Sniper team number 2 is slightly offset. Further beyond Trump, there's a V line going to them, to the tree. They can't see him either. He's right behind the edge of the tree, just out of their sight. He pops off 3 sides, but interestingly, he shows that from his position, out of sight of the far distant sniper team, he can just see, on the other side, Trump. And he makes his shot just on the edge of the tree, so none of the snipers can see him, but he can make a shot. Now, he hits Trump, or at least in the ear, and Trump goes down. Remember seeing that? And he shows a picture of the venue. There's a big black speaker box between the shooter and Trump. When Trump goes down, the shooter can't see Trump anymore. So what does he do? He rolls to the right so that he can get another shot. But he doesn't realize he's now put himself in the sights of the second sniper team, and they're the ones that kill him. The first sniper team never saw him at all, never shot. because they could never see him. Now this changes everything, doesn't it? It proves the snipers couldn't have been part of a conspiracy because they couldn't see him. All they could see was the guy waving arms and pointed. They heard the radio. Now, we don't know. In fact, I have a friend who's in the Secret Service. I put a call to him to find out if the Secret Service team was on that common tactical frequency. And he said yes, but not the snipers. The snipers don't want to be bothered with all that chit-chat between police or talking about bringing people through the detector, etc. And so they depended on the Secret Service tactical boss to relay it to the sniper. And of course, he feels strongly that they would have relayed to it. But they couldn't see it because he was behind the tree. Now this is crucial information. It's in the World Affairs Brief. That's the thing people pay me to find out. Now I'm a conspiracy believer. I've documented every major conspiracy in government. But I'm not for this conspiracy. I don't think it was an inside job. That said, I am not saying that the deep state might not have put an agent provocateur into that guy's life and made him into a terrorist. That he went on, despite the risk of dealing with the Secret Service there. Because you see, the shooter, Thomas Crooks, had some explosives in his van, and he had a sophisticated triggering device beside his cell phone when he died. Probably those explosives were to blow up anybody who tried to get into the van to investigate, etc., if he was trying to escape. I don't know the good reasons. But explosives was not his expertise. He was barely competent as a shooter. The day before, he had gone to the rifle range to practice. And in the morning of Saturday, when Donald Trump was shot, the parents, both certified counselors, one a libertarian and one a Democrat. So the kid must have seen a lot of arguing in the house. He calls the police and reports that his son is missing and that he's concerned about his welfare. Now, I don't think the parents were telling the whole truth. I think they knew something because the gun belonged to the father and that gun was missing. So his son's gone missing. He's been talking about hateful stuff about Trump. And he knows that Trump, and the father knows that Trump is in town. He puts two and two together. But does he tell the police, I think my son's going to try to kill the president? No. He just says my son is missing. He doesn't give them a picture, he gives them their name. But remember, the police who took a picture of him don't have a name associated with it. So there's no way, if it even got relayed to the Butler County Police, which I doubt if it did because he didn't say he was going to go shoot the president. So you see, there are really detailed explanations. It is not enough to have people say this has to be a conspiracy because the Secret Service knew 50 minutes in advance and did nothing. But the reason they did nothing, he wasn't armed any time that he was visible or when they took pictures. He got that gun out of the weapon, out of the van at the last minute, along with the ladder. Now, the Butler County Police were negligent in the sense that they claimed they went around the building checking for it, but they must not have looked at the little alleyway where that ladder was propped up against the building. But otherwise, and perhaps you could fault them for not having somebody on the roof. This Cheadle of the Secret Service said the roof was too steep to stand on. Well, below me, the snipers were on a sloping roof, and they had tripods that were meant for a slope. But the Butler County sniper should have been up on that roof, and that would have solved the problem. But I'm not willing to say that it was purposeful because they, in fact, did try to get the shooter, and they alerted, on the tactical frequency once it happened. So we have to be very careful. So that's my basic explanation of what happened in the assassination of Donald Trump. I think it was either a rogue individual doing the assassination, or he was put up to it by an agent, or he was induced by satanic inspiration. Now, I'm a very real believer in that. The Parkland shooter in Florida, remember, said he heard voices saying how to shoot and to use a gun. That comes from Satan. Now, that doesn't happen to everyone, but it happens, what you don't realize in your conscience, you have a receptor that hears spiritual impressions. And you get impressions and promptings from the Lord and warnings from the Lord, and you get temptations and calm feelings and rationalizations from Satan. And if you listen to Satan's voice long enough, It'll eventually get to dark, brooding feelings and feelings of suicide and depression and anxiety. There isn't a single person that commits suicide that isn't infected with Satan and satanic influence, heavy selective, telling them to kill themselves. I had a brother die of suicide. Tried to talk him out of it many times and talked to him about this same thing. He was in situations that Satan was able to say, there's no way out, you gotta kill yourself. You can't get away from these situations, both financial and in his married life, etc. Well, he finally killed himself down where I live in Sanpete County, out on an old farm road. And my brother, the next older brother from this youngest brother who killed himself, is an attorney. He went to pick up my brother's car. He got in the car to drive it away, and he said, it was the most horrifying experience of my life. It was filled with satanic spirits, just cackling, laughing that God good. He had to flee the car and have it towed. So don't tell me that satanic influences are involved in suicide. And that's my big grief with counselors today and psychologists. They're taught there is no such thing as Satan. You never mention God. And you don't believe in innateness. And what is innateness? It means that you lived before you came to earth. And we weren't all goody two-shoes, raising your hand to the square and pledging allegiance to Jesus Christ. You didn't have to do that. Anybody can come to earth who wanted to, as long as they were able to take the penalty for failing the test of your year. And so we have one scriptural evidence of one person who was in league with Satan, who came to earth, wasn't aligned with Jesus Christ, wasn't good, wasn't part of the good two-thirds. Now, just because they were part of the two-thirds, by the way, doesn't mean they were good. It just means we're not with Satan. His name was Cain. Abraham chapter 5 says he was masterman and perdition before the world was. Perdition. That doesn't sound like a goody two-shoes pledging allegiance to Jesus Christ and the atonement, does it? And if Cain was like that, you can't tell me that Hitler and Stalin and other very, very evil men weren't also in league with Satan before they came here. But even you people, you had tendencies. You were watching what was going on, or you could get infected by what was going on. You're here today because you were probably worried about the constitutional liberties being lost. And you vowed, I'm going to work for liberty when I get there. I know I was part of that. But there are other people who are immune to the Spirit, who want to be, ooh, I want to try that one again. Ooh, I want to try alcohol and drugs and other things. And that's why they have proclivities toward those things. But you see, psychologists don't believe in that. They don't believe in analyzing what a person's innate is. Now, I come from a family of 10 children. And I'll tell you, every one of those 10 children is different. Same DNA, same genes, same environment, identical, and they're all completely different from their birth on. My mother would testify to that. Every one of you were different. And any one of you with lots of children know that that's true. And that's the way life is. We come with different proclivities, and that's why we're resistant to the voice of the Lord in conscience, because He's after us. He's after us to change, to overcome our innate weaknesses. And we're comfortable where we are. We don't want to change. And that's the trap of being a Christian, is to think, I'm saved, I believe in Jesus Christ. I tell him to get lost every time he prompts me to change. And when you go up to the other side, you want to embrace him. He's going to put up his hand to you and say, not so fast. You've got to tell me why he told me to get lost 155,000 times. Where did I tell you to get lost? When I told you not to have that second or third helping. When I prompted you to exercise. When I prompted you to discipline your children. When I prompted you not to send them to public schools. You see, we've all had problems rejecting the promises of the Lord. We need to get better at that. It's not enough to be conservative. It's not enough to be for the Constitution. You've got to have a personal relationship with God about listening to the promptings and develop the self-control to do it. Because believe me, as Jeff mentioned in what he read today, we're going to face the hardest times of any generation on this earth. There's going to be a nuclear war in our lifetime, probably before the end of this decade. Hill Air Force is going to be obliterated. And you're right next to this target area. got to do something about it. We don't want to be here when those new missiles fall. And they will take out Hill, not only because of F-35s there, being a regional maintenance base, but because all of the guidance systems of the MX missiles are stored at Hill. And the missile bodies are out in the West Desert for preservation. And the Russians and the Chinese don't want us to put those missiles back together and shoot them off. That's why these are major targets. Now let me tell you something else about my general knowledge of conspiracy. And this is important because we have a problem with the deep state. The Republicans just revamped their platform, right? It's a pretty good platform, except they softened their stance on homosexual marriage and homosexuality. And they softened their stance on abortion to help get Trump elected. Because they know inside themselves that this majority of our country are pro-abortion. And why are they pro-abortion? Because they're pro-immorality. And immoral people want to have the option of abortion. And you know that about 60 to 70% of abortions now don't even take place in a Planned Parenthood clinic. Take the abortion pill. That's how most of them happen. A lot of the illegal. Now, I'm not for putting women in prison for abortion. They just need to meet their maker and explain to them why they killed their child. But that's not our role in that case to do that. But the point is, we've got to defend life every possibility we can. But it's really a moot point because, you see, our government is controlled by a deep state. And so the issues are really moot. Who's going to change them? You know, the Republican Party, there's a lot of you who are probably still members of the Republican Party, and you still have hope that it's going to change. Why do you have hope? Because we're that far away from winning, right? We're just that far away from winning. We can win over Donald Trump. Well, I'm here to tell you they're not going to let Donald Trump win. The mechanism for stealing the election is still in vogue. Nothing's been changed. You still have every election computer, including here in Utah, that's connected to the internet. The results can be changed, votes can be flipped. In November 20th edition of the World Affairs Brief, I documented how they stole the election from Trump in 2020. Somebody hacked into the Edison research computers that tabulate all of the results from state elections. It's owned by a Spanish company. They tabulate our elections. It used to be an Israeli company that tabulated something stupid. Should never let foreign countries tabulate our elections. But in any case, someone hacked into the database, put it out on a spreadsheet, and said, look at this. Here's in Virginia, and that wasn't even considered one of the swing states, was it? Fox News even called that for Trump, for Biden, you know, polls were even closed yet. That's because Fox News is really part of the conspiracy. They're just playing conservative to keep you wedded to it. But they showed how many hundreds of thousands of votes have been flipped from Trump to Biden, and how many hundreds of thousands of votes came in for Trump that never got in his account, never got on his tally. That same election you saw in the election of Kentucky, at least the Kentucky people saw, election flipping right before their very eyes. Governor Beshears was running against a Republican, and they saw the votes come in of 36,152 added to Beshears, and that same amount was detracted from the Republican. Right there, and then 2 seconds later, it flipped back. They erased it. But you see, that was a flip. It came from Edison research. Now, Donald Trump never presented that information to the courts because he'd hired Rudy Giuliani, who was deep state. How do I know that? Because he was involved in the 9/11 cover-up. He was in Building 7, got word that it was going to be pulled. He got his people out, everybody out, but he didn't warn the firefighters in Buildings 1 and 2 that were going to be exploded by demolitions too. See, the terrorists couldn't have loaded those explosives with buildings with explosives. Only the deep state could have done it. So to this day, the firefighters in New York who know about this hate Rudy Giuliani. Well, he was a drunk most of the time when he was working for Donald Trump. He never presented that information, and so the judges threw out every one of those election cases on the basis that you proved that there were election irregularities, but you haven't shown me quantitatively how it would have changed the election. They needed the Edison research data that I had and I published, and it was on the internet. You see, Donald Trump Might be a good president if he had me as an advisor. They'll never let me near him because I'm a conspiracy expert. They don't want to know. They didn't know about these things. I could help Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, he is right about the two major conspiracies, the collusion between Big Pharma and government and the falsification of the vaccine trials. It's criminal. Fauci was responsible. If you've ever read the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, it is an eye-opener. And then you read his Wuhan cover-up, and then he doesn't want to use the word conspiracy. It's written all over the book. You know it's a massive conspiracy about the Wuhan cover-up. But what RFK doesn't realize in foreign policy is the Soviet Union faked their own demise. And that's why the entire conservative movement, I don't know how many of you have bought into that fact, that Russia is now reformed, that dumps communism, they're good guys, and Ukraine is the bad guys. And that Putin was justified in going to it because of the fear of having NATO on his border. Well, let me dispose of those things very easily to you. In 1989 and 91, Russia faked their own demise. In fact, Putin even admitted this to Tucker Carlson in his famous interview with him. You probably all saw that interview. I don't know if it went over your head like it did Tucker Carlson, but he said, you know, Tucker, the Russians essentially initiated the fall of the Soviet Union. Okay, so what? Didn't blink an eye. I watched after that speech, and even anti-Russian people out of the EU didn't pick up what he had said. They didn't realize the official narrative is what? That it was a spontaneous uprising of people wanting to be free that the Soviet Union couldn't control. Isn't that it? Of course. And he's just admitted the Russians faked their own demise. Erich Honecker on his deathbed in Chile said, Moscow gave me orders to let the Leipzig student riots go forward. In other words, I gave a stand-down order to the Stasi to not interfere. Same thing happened in Red Square with the KGB was given a stand-down order so nobody was arrested protesting with Yeltsin about democracy. And the communist TV station kept the lines open with Yeltsin on top of the tent, the tank, yelling for democracy. They could have pulled the plug. It was a fraud. And so was the Gorbachev coup. Remember that the KGB failed to capture Gorbachev in his undefended villa. He had 4 or 5 bodyguards, and the KGB failed. Since when has the KGB failed at overthrowing a major government? Never. And yet after the failed coup, what did the media announce? The head of the Defense Department, the GRU, and the KGB have fled for their lives. Everybody accepted that as, oh yeah, is that right? Only I asked the question, who are they fleeing from? Who does the head of the KGB flee from? Who does the head of the Defense Department flee from? Who does the head of military intelligence flee from? If they're the real heads. See what I'm saying? Why didn't the mainstream media, why didn't the government come out and say, hey, this smells like a rat? This is phony. Well, I'm here to tell you that our government, if I could see it, knew that it was a fraud as well, but they were still in the mode of covering for the Soviet Union. They were still in the mode because their purpose as globalists has been to use war to get the Americans into a global government. They tried it in World War I and gave us the League of Nations, and that got turned down, right? So they gave us another war. The Treaty of Versailles guaranteed another war because the reparations were so onerous against Germany, including repayment in gold marks, billions and billions of dollars to the Allies that they couldn't afford. And so what did Wall Street do? They went to the Weimar Republic and said, just go off the gold standard, start printing money. Pay off your reparations that way. And what did that do? Well, France decided, we don't want your paper money, we want the gold, we're not giving you the gold. So what do? They invade the Ruhr industrial district, all the steel and coal mining area of Germany. That's where all their foreign exchange comes from, selling gold, selling silver and coal, steel and coal to the rest of the world. They took over the area, they forced the workers to keep working, and they wouldn't pay them. So the German government started to pay them with fiat money, and inflation started to rise. And then the rest of the German workers said, hey, our money isn't worth as much. We need to have our money got paid for it. So they started to index everybody's salaries to the rate of inflation. Now, they weren't told that by Wall Street, but that's the death knell to the German mark. When you index everybody's salaries, there's no prohibition, there's no resistance to raising salaries. To inflate the money, then just raise your salaries until everybody was taking wheelbarrows full of 1,000-mark bills to buy a loaf of bread. And do you have a wheelbarrow full of $100 bills? We have inflation. But we don't have hyperinflation. And the reason we don't is because we don't have indexing, except in one agency. Anyone know what that is? That's indexed to the rate of inflation? All of you old people should know. It's called COLA. COLA. What is it? Cost of living allowance for Social Security. Indexed to inflation. You're supposed to get an increase in Social Security every year because of the rate of inflation. Why do you think the U.S. fudges the rate of inflation? Because they've got one item index that is mammoth, and they don't want to pay you. And so they told the Commerce Department, you got to fudge the rate of inflation and depress it. When anything rises, they take it out of the baskets of goods and replace it with something that isn't rising. Housing, rentals, because nobody's renting anymore, we'll put house purchases in. Nobody's buying housing, we'll put rentals back in. And they just keep switching the basket, keeping the inflation rate down by 3 times. Whatever the CPI is, you can times it by 3 and get the approximate real rate of inflation. Now, we've been having a 9 to 10% rate of inflation for 20 years. People can eventually adjust to that, but not 15% like it was last year. And it's still way above 10%, and we're hurting mightily about those things. But it still isn't hyperinflation because you can't have hyperinflation without indexing. Without indexing, you get 15 to 20%, and what happens? You get stagflation. And what is stagflation? It's when people stop buying because they can't afford it. And then you have a recession happening at the same time you've got inflation. That's what happened in 1976. That's what caused Nixon to have price controls to try to stop it. And that's why he went off the gold standard, because we were printing money out the wazoo, and France was trying to repatriate the dollars at $35 an ounce in gold. And it was draining the treasury. So nothing as it seems is our government. But I'll tell you, you are regaled probably constantly if you read any of the financial news in the alternative press about the dollar's imminent collapse. Remember when Libya was going off the dollar? And that's why they said they invaded Libya. It wasn't the real reason, but they said it's going to destroy the petrodollar. And then Iran went off the petrodollar. That was going to destroy the dollar. It didn't, did it? And now Saudi Arabia has gone off the petrodollar. And that's supposed to destroy the dollar, but it hasn't. Do you know why it hasn't? Because the U.S. has inflated the currency so much and spread the inflation around the world. They have a pool that's approximately 100 times bigger than any other currency in the world. So only the U.S. can get away with inflating with abandon and not have it show up as hyperinflation at home. Now it's high inflation because they're having to keep this bubble inflated. They're having to pump out trillions of dollars, not just for the COVID thing. That's what gave us the initial boost of high inflation. But now they're pumping out trillions still, and they give it to the Wall Street banks. Why do you think the Wall Street Dow Jones Industrial keeps building? Because they keep inflating the bubble. And you have gurus like Rickards talking about an imminent depression. He's been saying that since 2010. It hasn't happened. It won't happen as long as the Fed keeps priming the pump and inflating the bubble. And it probably won't happen until war comes. Why war? Because you see, war gives an excuse to start over with a new currency and repudiate the debt. Who's going to complain in a war when you have an EMP strike and you have no electricity, you have no access to your bank accounts, no cryptocurrency, they've gone to zero, and the banks and the government says we're repudiating the debt. Well, so what? Nobody can get the debt anyway. Nobody can collect. Nobody has a bank account. It's the perfect time to repudiate the debt when you have another world war. And it's coming. Now, going back to the Ukraine war situation, the reason why the government covered for the Soviet Union's phony collapse is that they were still in the mode of protecting. been going on ever since World War II. Remember Lend-Lease? You couldn't buy washing machines and sewing machines in the United States, but they were shipping those products over to Russia as Lend-Lease. Was that military necessity for Russian women to have washing machines and sewing machines? We shipped over a whole fat Ford truck plant. We shipped over the tooling for most of the aircraft that we're building. So most of the Soviet aircraft were direct copies of U.S. They had their own version of B-29, the B-17, and other aircraft, and fighter aircraft as well. But even after World War II ended, Major Racy Jordan of the Great Falls, Montana Air Force Base kept a diary of what was being shipped to Russia. This is after the war. He saw 6 big black trunks being shipped off with diplomatic bags and said, that's a pretty big shipment, diplomatic baggage to Russia. I better confiscate that stuff and open those trunks up. And he did, and the Russians just had a fit. He opened them up and found they contained all the rest of the plans to the nuclear atomic bomb that they couldn't steal from the Manhattan Project were being shipped by the U.S. to Russia. He confiscated it. About 3 hours later, he gets a call from Harry Hopkins, a communist spy in the Truman White House, saying, give those trunks back to the Russians and don't ever tell anyone what you saw. Well, he gave it back to the Russians. And he wrote it in his diary, so that we now have his record. Major Racy Jordan. It's a phenomenal book, still available on his diary, still available at Amazon. But that wasn't all. We gave Russia the first shipment of enriched uranium. They couldn't enrich uranium. So they could explode their first nuclear weapon by 1949. We made Russia a nuclear power. We allowed them to take a lot of the Nazi rocket scientists back to Russia, and they dismantled whole factories in Germany, including the rocket factories, to take back to Russia, and that's why they were ahead of us in rocket technology until the war had gone and helped us catch up. But we continued to build the Soviet Union, and we continued to bring the communists to power in China. It was George Catlin Marshall, who was a globalist, who ran World War II over General Eisenhower, who cut off military aid to Chiang Kai-shek and let Mao Zedong come to power in China. It was Marshall who had tried to force Chiang Kai-shek to make a coalition government with the communists. And Chiang refused. He knew what happened to every other country that's done a coalition government with the communists. They get killed. So he refused. And so Catlin Marshall cut off military aid. And if you read the Wikipedia article about Chiang Kai-shek, how corrupt he was as a warlord, etc., well, he wasn't anywhere near as corrupt as the communists were, but that's not the point. The Wikipedia says he lost the support of his troops and they started to abandon him. That's the official story. Well, if you didn't have any arms and ammunition and fighting the communists coming in, you deserve too, I think. That was the real reason of Wikipedia, which is a government deep state operation, at least in politically sensitive areas, tells you. We brought Castro to power by cutting off military aid to Batista. We brought Sandinistas to power. This was during one was the Eisenhower administration, the rest was the Carter administration. We brought the Ayatollah Khomeini to power by poisoning the Shah of Iran and keeping the Ayatollah in a villa paid for by the CIA in France until he was ready to take power in Iran. So see, nothing is as it seems. Do you realize that in the war on terror that we created Al-Qaeda out of the Mujahideen, that Osama bin Laden worked for the CIA? He was seen undergoing kidney dialysis in a hospital in Dubai, meeting with the CIA head of station. He died 2 years before Obama and the SEAL Team 6 apparently killed Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Did you hear what I said? Osama bin Laden was killed, was dead of kidney disease 2 years before. Who did they kill in Abbottabad? One of CIA's lookalikes. Who looks almost identical. That's who did the propaganda films, admitting to claim that he did 9/11. Osama bin Laden didn't do 9/11. It was a deep state operation from the beginning. They hired the terrorists. They loaded the buildings with explosives. They hijacked the airplanes with uninterrupted autopilots and put drones in place. It's just amazing what's out there. Wouldn't this wake people up in the United States if they knew all that I know? But you see, being part of the Republican Party puts you to sleep because you're always that close to winning. And you never talk about conspiracy. You never talk about conspiracy at Fox News, do you? Bill O'Reilly, remember him? Well, I tell you, whoever mentioned conspiracy to him, you bite your head off. Same thing with Sean Hannity, doesn't believe in conspiracy. And of course, Tucker Carlson believed a little bit in it and got fired. But you see, Tucker Carlson really doesn't know anything about conspiracy because he missed everything that Vladimir Putin told him in his interview. He missed the fact when Vladimir Putin said, you know, Stalin and Lenin put the Russian-speaking people in the Donbass and in Crimea into the borders of Ukraine. Now, I don't know why, he said. And I don't know why either. You know. Well, of course, it's obvious. Anatoly Golitsyn, the greatest defector from the Soviet Union, said they're going to fake their own demise in order to get Western aid and trade, and that's exactly what they did. But you see, when you fake your own demise and you let your satellites free, you've got to have some excuse to come back and take them back before World War III. The way to do that is you put hundreds of thousands of people into Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, into the Baltic states, which are now part of NATO. And you put all these Russian people speaking in Ukraine. And then what you do, when Ukraine has elected a consecutive group of nationalists in Ukraine. Now remember, in the phony fall of the Soviet Union, the Russians never purged any of those countries of the communists, and neither did the West when they let them into NATO. They never purged the communists. So Putin doesn't mind if a country joins NATO. He's got hundreds of spies still in there that can tell him what's going on in NATO. He's just faking it. And Ukraine is so corrupt because they have all the communist bureaucrats still in power. The people I've talked to, Ukrainians, I know several of them, said we still had to pay bribes to the same people as during the Soviet Union. We hated the bureaucrats. It's no wonder Burisma took place and they were paying bribes to Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. That's part of the corruption. But the Ukrainian people don't deserve to be part of the continuing Soviet Union. And that's why I'm not in favor of letting Putin take it back. But you see, here's how it happened in the Maidan coup of 2014. Now, you've all been told about Victoria Nuland, right? How she put $5 billion into the protests in Ukraine, and that it was a Western coup that overthrew a legitimate president elected in Ukraine. That's all you've been told. You hear it from everybody, from Fox News to Napolitano to Tucker Carlson, every conservative out there, Ron Paul, Alex Jones, they all believe they're garbage. I know the facts. Here are the facts. It wasn't $5 billion. It was probably less than $1 million. $5 billion was the whole budget for all of Eastern Europe to promote democracy. Now, they don't really promote democracy in the U.S. They promote socialism in the name of democracy. But nevertheless, it wasn't $5 billion. And number two, the legitimately elected president was in a rigged election where a communist, Viktor Yanukovych, got elected. Full communist, buddy with Vladimir Putin. And there was an uprising, a protest against this communist and his tactics. And they weren't giving up. It's true that the West did fund protests. Now, after about 3 months of these protests, when they were burning tires to keep warm during the winter time, Viktor Yanukovych announces that he's making a deal with the protest leaders to end the protests. So he meets with Klitschko, who's now the current mayor of Kiev, a former boxing champion, and 2 other people, and makes a deal, presents it on a Thursday, and the people in the street say, no, we don't respect that. They don't represent us. These are puppets of Yanukovych. We don't respect these people. So they refuse to accept it. So they wake up on Friday morning, the protesters, and suddenly the Berkut, the riot police, are nowhere to be seen. They have been surrounding them and torturing them and shooting them and beating them for 3 solid months, and they weren't anywhere to be seen. They've been given a stand-down order. And so what did the protesters do? They walked out of the square, they walked through the presidential palace, and guess what? There were no guards at the palace. That's like the January 6th protesters going up to the Capitol. There's no Capitol Police. Could the protesters have issued a stand-down order? No. Only Nancy Pelosi. Could the protesters have issued a stand-down order to the Berkut? No. Only Yanukovych could have done it. And then the Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament, on Saturday, the next day, vote to oust Yanukovych. But the Rada's in charge of a communist coalition, the majority. That's like the Democrats ousting Joe Biden or Barack Obama. How believable is that? See, it's all fake. Just as they faked their own demise in the Soviet Union, they faked this Ukrainian coup. And why would they do that? A very simple reason. Well, it's not simple, it's all very complex, because you have the good guys playing the bad guys playing the good guys. Conspiracy is always very messy. But you see, Yanukovych flees for his life, even though the protesters are not armed. And they put in an interim president who, by the way, Victoria Nuland was caught in a telephone call with me. That's the one we wanted for president. You can't ever tell what these globalists are doing. They play both sides too. But anyway, so Yatsenyuk is an interim president. And then they have an election a month later, and Piotr Poroshenko is elected. Now, Piotr Poroshenko campaigns as a Ukrainian nationalist, just like Timoshenko did and other Ukrainian presidents who were actually Soviet plants. And so is Poroshenko. But he campaigns as a Ukrainian nationalist, and he says to the Donbass, you can speak Russian, you can have a semi-autonomous government, same with I mean, we just want peace. As soon as he gets elected, what does he do? No, you've got to speak Ukrainian, you can't speak Russian. You're not going to get to be autonomous. He provoked them. And guess what? The next 20 days, Putin does a stealth invasion to save the Russian people from these provocations. See, it's a setup. Could Yanukovych, a pro-Russian communist, could he have provoked the Donbass? No, it wouldn't have made sense. What's a communist provoking us? But when a pretended false Ukrainian nationalist provokes him, Putin to the rescue. That's how this whole thing started. Very sophisticated. I have worn out my days trying to teach the conservative. I've been on Alex Jones twice telling this, and he just goes on with this. I'm in solidarity with Russia. Russia's Christian. Russia's anti-woke. Russia's trying to dismantle our own deep state. Baloney. Yeah, they don't want wokeness within their own people. They don't want to corrupt their own people. But they're still trying to propagandize with all the communists in Hollywood, American people. They want us corrupted. And Putin is, yes, he's pro-Christian, the Orthodox Church, but they don't tell you in the history books that during the Soviet years, the Orthodox Christian Church, the Orthodox Catholic Church of Russia, never made one peep against Soviet atrocities. Because Stalin had put in communists at the head of the Orthodox Christian Church. And that's why Zelensky banned the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, because they're full of pro-Russian communists who are undermining the war. But you see, they don't make Christians colonels in the KGB. Christians don't kill and bomb and throw missiles at innocent civilians in civilian areas. They don't torture, take, and kidnap little children from Ukraine and put them in concentration camps in Russia. That's what Putin does. So you got to wake up, conservatives. Things are not like you say, man. Good people like Ron Paul are just naive. How did they get that way? Now, I'm a good friend of Ron Paul, but he doesn't believe there are any enemies but our own deep state. And all the Blue Rockwell libertarians are that same way. There are no enemies but our own deep state. Why do they think that? Because of the phony war on terror. In the first place, they don't believe in conspiracies, and they don't know the government did 9/11 to create a phony war on terror. They don't know the U.S. created Al-Qaeda out of Mujahideen. They don't know that they invaded Libya to create all those Muslim extremists, which they imported into Syria, calling it a civil war. It wasn't. It was an invasion by U.S.-backed jihadists. And then they took half of those jihadists and they turned them into ISIS. Gave them a name change, but gave them priority in funding, secret funding, and sent them on a rampage into Iraq. Now, why Iraq? Iraq had already been conquered. Why send ISIS into Iraq? Did anyone ask that question? Remember that? Why were they going into Iraq against another Muslim country? Because you see, the deep state objective was to create millions of Iraqi and Syrian refugees that would flood Europe. And now Europe is 25% Muslim, and Belgium is 60% Muslim. There's areas in France that the police dare not go into. The globalists want conflict. They want to destroy Western culture, and they did that through the phony war on terror. But you see, what did the conservatives say? They saw legitimately that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, that Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11. And so they came to the conclusion, there aren't any of the deep state, the neocons, remember the neocons, those are actually Democrats that came over to the Republican side to push this war of intervention, this phony war on terror. They're actually Democrats and leftists, they're not on the right. And they say, well, the neocons started these wars, so there must be, and those people are innocent, and so anybody the globalists are against must be innocent. So the globalists against Russia must be innocent. Globalists against China, they must be innocent. To this day, Ron Paul doesn't believe that China is an enemy. With all their military buildup, Russia isn't an enemy. It's very sad how naive libertarians and some conservatives can be. But I'm here to tell you that you've got to know this stuff to be president of the United States. Now, I'm running for president not because I'm going to win. I'm running for president because most of my information is behind a paywall in the low interest rate. It's only $48 a year, but most people expect to get everything free from the internet. But you don't get my kind of information free of charge, because I wear out my life trying to put it together, and I need to stay alive. You know, Chuck Baldwin puts out a free newsletter, and he's starving to death. He has hundreds of thousands of free subscribers, but he's starving to death. That's why he has to hawk his wares every Wednesday. But I don't want to take advertising. I simply want to put out the truth, and I want to encourage people to subscribe to it, to support it. But you see, you've got to know conspiracy history to know who's deep state and who isn't. Now, I know that Brett Kavanaugh, Trump put on the Supreme Court's deep state. Why do I know that? Because he was second in command to Ken Starr to cover up for the Vince Foster murder. That was the lawyer for the Clintons who was killed by the deep state because he was going to talk to Congress about Clinton's secret bank accounts in Switzerland. And they killed him. Clintons didn't know anything about it. They were surprised with anybody. See, that's how the deep state takes care of their own. They kill, you don't even have to worry about it. We make sure that you've got immunity. That's how the deep state recruits people. Look, you cheat on your wife, you're a pedophile, you're a homosexual, we protect you. What do you think the Epstein files were all about? Most of these were globalists that take place. They were about blackmail, but that's just in case. Those people are willing participants. They don't need to be blackmailed, but just in case, they've got the files, they've got the films of them doing horrendous acts that keeps them running. So that's how the deep state operates, and as I've said before in some of my interviews, at the highest levels, and we don't know who really runs the globalist deep state. It's above the Kissinger level, it's above George Soros, etc. They always keep themselves hidden. But I think they have actual revelatory information from Satan addressed. There has to be a unifying force that keeps this globalist conspiracy going from 1900 on to today without missing a beat. A mafia chieftain can't even keep a mafia empire past 2 generations. It falls apart and gets taken over. Not this globalist one. It's had a continuing that won't stop. And I think they get revelation from Satan directly. And you know what he promises them? The same thing as the Faustian Pact. The Faustian Pact is, you help me destroy the kingdom of God, and I will make you wealthy and powerful, and you will never pay the price in the chains of hell. And think about that. You're guilty of every sin imaginable. If Satan comes to you, the head of a conspiracy like he did Cain, and says, you do my bidding, and you'll never see the chains of hell. Will they believe it? Well, they really don't have any choice. They know they're going to hell if they don't believe it. This is their last hope. So you read Isaiah chapter 14, and you'll see that Isaiah had a vision about he that was going to thrash the world with his power, descends in chains into hell. And all of the great men of the world were in hell waiting for him who was going to thrash the earth to save them. And then he sees them descend into chains and said, "Ooh, art thou brought low like unto us?" See, he saw a vision of the future where all of these wealthy people who got wealthy because of a pact from Satan are sitting in the chains of hell and waiting for Satan to make good on that promise and save them from hell, and he descends in chains, and they know the jig is up. That's a tremendous vision. Now, you won't read as clearly in Isaiah 14 as I just told you. It's in bits and pieces, but you'll see it if you read it. You say, "Ooh, that's right. That's where he says he's descending into chains." So we're in a struggle against good and evil in this world. It's not just about the Constitution. It is about the fact that we are losing majorities, that we've long lost the majority. At the Constitution National Party Convention, I went through the statistics that prove we are a very small minority. You know, there are only 43 million Republicans out of 350 million people in this world. And we're a third of the people that vote. The other third are Democrats, and the other third are independents. Half of those independents lean Republican, half of them are Democrats. But of the Republicans, how many are really dyed-in-the-wool conservatives? At the Republican National Committee meeting, when they have Amber Rose, a Satanist and dedicated slut, talk about how she's been converted to Donald Trump. I mean, I don't care if you say you're converted to Jesus Christ. If you're a Satanist, you're lying. Why put her on the bill? Why put Hulk Hogan on the bill? Why does Trump pick J.D. Vance as his vice president? Do you trust anybody that the established media makes your book about a bestseller and then makes a movie about you and then makes you wealthy with all of the high-tech people like Peter Thiel backing you and Elon Musk? Something smells like a rat. There's no other conservative in the United States that they ever treated as well as J.D. Vance. If they take Donald Trump were to win and they took his life, he'd be the president. I tell you, I smell a rat. J.D. Vance is not conservative. He's a Johnny-come-lately. Donald Trump has very bad judgment. He even said he's going to give a cabinet position to Jamie Dimon, head of Goldman Sachs, a globalist. He's clueless about conspiracy, about the globalist conspiracy. He's not going to be your savior. Now the problem is that this nation's going down. As Gary North said, the Lord doesn't destroy this nation, he owes Sodom and Gomorrah and Apollo. Now, that's not true yet, but it's coming true. It's growing bigger. We are not growing as a majority. We're gaining a few converts, and my mission really is to help save the remnant. The Lord will always save the remnant, even in the upcoming war. But you've got to be prepared to be saved. So, this is tough, and this war is going to be particularly excruciating because it's going to be beginning with an EMP strike to take down the grid. And that's a high altitude, probably 8 or 9 high altitude weapons in the high atmosphere that send down electromagnetic waves, hit the power lines, go through, and blow out every single transformer there is, especially the high speed of the high voltage transformers that are made in China. And guess what? We don't stockpile any of these transformers in the United States. They're all made in China. When you go to war with Russia and China, you're not getting any more of those transformers. So I don't know how you bring the grid back up. Now, if you've got some solar and it's EMP protected, you've got a generator and it's unplugged so it doesn't get fried as well, you may create some of your own electricity. But it's expensive, it's cheap, and remember that you'll have masses of people pounding at your door and wanting to get warm in the winter or use your electricity or share in your food. And if you start sharing, you'll be starving with everyone else within 2 weeks. So you can see it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be tough. So, we can talk about the glories of the Constitution, and it truly was glorious, but it has been whittled down by the Supreme Court so that it is no longer effective. In fact, if you are a dissident in the United States, like a January 6th protester, you have no rights, no habeas corpus, they throw you in jail, there are people in there for 2 years without a trial. What about the speedy trial provision of the Constitution? What about the judges? Well, they're mostly controlled by the deep state, and so are the prosecutors. So you see, if you're on the wrong side of government, and you are, you just haven't been locked up yet, and you don't have any rights. If you don't have any rights, nobody has any rights. They just don't want to let the majority of people know the Constitution is dead, because there might be a rebellion. And that's why they keep these secret acts of government hidden. That's why they locked up the JFK files for 50 years. And Donald Trump, remember, he said, I'm going to open up the JFK files when I'm the president. And he didn't do it. And Judge Napolitano of Fox News asked him, why didn't you unlock the 50 files of the JFK files, the 50-year-old files? It's long past that happened in the Obama administration. He refused to open it, so did Trump. He said, Mike Pompeo of the CIA came to me and he told me something that scared my socks off about what would happen in the United States if we revealed these files. So I didn't reveal them. And Napolitano said, well, what did he tell you? And Trump said, I can't tell you. It's a secret. Well, I can't trust Donald Trump to know whether or not what they tell him is the truth or not. I would know. And if it was the truth, I'm darn well going to tell the American people about it. I don't care if it destroys the government. It's not going to destroy the nation. It will make it stronger. People will shout, finally, you know the truth about why the deep state, our own government, killed JFK, why they killed RFK, why they killed Martin Luther King, and that was for the martyr syndrome. Martin Luther King was having orgies, sexual orgies with his buddies every weekend with prostitutes for the last 10 years of his life. He was the biggest religious hypocrite in the world. Not only a plagiarist to get his doctorate in religion, but a moral hypocrite. When he died, I was chairman of the Conservative National Committee in Washington, and I asked, and Hoover had just retired, so I asked Assistant Director Gray on the telephone, I said, what's in the 13 file cabinets that were squirreled away for 50 years? What are we not supposed to see? And he said, well, I'm not allowed to tell you specifically what's in the files, but 8 of those file cabinets were strictly pornographic tape recordings and video recordings that we had of his dalliances with prostitutes, including at his Nobel Prize ceremony in Oslo. And he said the other 3 file cabinets were full of his communist connection. Now that's Martin Luther King for you, a national hero. And you are excoriated if you criticize Martin Luther King who's been put on such hero status. That's what we're dealing with today. You've got to know these things to drain the swamp. Trump can't do that. Well, I'm not going to win either, but I'm trying to spread the word outside of my World Affairs brief through this campaign so that you understand that somebody running for president has the answers. And when they come true, when they steal the election from Trump, when this war comes by the end of this decade, we're not in trouble. Remember, only one candidate for president told us the truth. Now, at the National Party, my nomination at the National Party was kind of stolen from me by a professional anti-abortion activist called Ray Patriots. He's on the national ballot for the Constitution Party. How did he get there? He's not a member of the party, but he came into the party after having failed to get the Democratic nomination, failed to get the Republican nomination, failed to run as an independent, and decided, I'm going to try the Constitution Party. Maybe they're stupid enough to take me in. Well, I was already running. The chairman of the party had asked me to run after he had asked me to give the keynote address. I accepted, reluctantly. But unbeknownst to me, Mr. Terry had gone to all the other parties and introduced himself and poisoned them about me by telling me, you know, this guy Skousen is running for the nomination. He's made an abbreviated form of the Constitution platform and taken God completely. He's purged God from the platform. He's made it an anti-God platform. And what are these evangelical and all these small Constitution parties are mostly religious based? What are they going to think about this guy Skousen, who's a Mormon, and we don't like Mormons anyway, purging God from the platform? Well, I only found out about this attack on me in the New Hampshire call. I was on a Zoom call, but I came after Randy Terry. And I heard him demean me. I heard him get this thing, and I said, wait a minute. I said, there's no more person religious than I am here. And I said, I only abbreviated the platform to take it from 40 pages down to 7 usable pages so that somebody would read it. And part of those cutting of things was all the big preamble about many things, including God and other things, but there's no obvious intent to perjure God. It's just that, even the founders didn't want the appearance of a religious test in the Constitution. They wanted just religious freedom of all. They didn't want to make you a Christian. You didn't have to believe in Jesus. You didn't have to even believe in God. You had religious freedom. That's what they wanted. And I spoke at the Oregon Constitution Party, and it has a highly religious test. I mean, it's a pledge you've got to say about Jesus Christ is my personal Savior, or this and that. And so you can't be a Muslim and join that party. You can't be a Mormon and join the party. You have to believe in the Nicene Creed and other things. And they have 10 people in the party. And that's what happens when you have a religious test. Nobody wants to join unless you're part of that particular religious sect. That's not what the founders intended. So that's the battle I fought. On August 3rd, I'm going to the Idaho Convention, which broke away from the Constitution National Party, supposedly because their abortion stance wasn't tough enough. And that's the same thing with the Oregon. All the parties have broken away over the issue of abortion. Well, I'm very tough on abortion. But Graham Terry is the champion of abortion because he is claiming to have money and rules of it and going to run TV ads. And he showed us some of those TV ads at the convention.